Let me just make one comment before we move into the secondary style that I have, which is analytical. And that is many people, based upon what your description just now, might assume that, well, a leader needs to be a driver.
Right.
And I think that that's not what we're saying.
Exactly.
We're saying that a person can be an effective leader with any of the four styles as primary. But associated with those, there are certain strengths, and there are also certain challenges that that person might face. So my secondary style was analytical.
Analytical, right. And of course, analytical is almost self-explanatory without much. That individual likes to look and assess data, information, observe in a way that's very logical, sequential, and likes to make sure that he or she has the information that they need, or at least enough information before they'll make a decision. And that's very much you. You know, in working with you and working as a supervisor in our early years together, I learned very quickly that you had tremendous skills at being able to look at things and put them into perspective in relationship to the potential mission or the vision or the goal that we were trying to attain. And so you're what's called above the line. And so those individuals that are analytical and driver, or driver analytical, makes no difference in which order they are in as primary or backup style, is that they're a little less emoting in the workplace, and they sometimes can be seen as stoic and not earthy enough. And
there's that word again.
I mean, you know, we brought that up in the last show, and we talk about the earthiness. So sometimes they're perceived as being less emoting, and in the workplace and getting the task done, they very much are like that. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't care for people or they don't have feelings and understand, but it's the task, it's getting the goal met.
And the leadership is primarily a rational exercise.
Is exactly right. And then the other aspect about it is that those that are below the line are a little more emoting. And so let's talk about me.
Okay.
And my primary style is expressive, with my backup or secondary style is driver. And with a high level of amiability. And excuse me, what happens is that we find ourselves in a situation where I can cross over from driver to amiability fairly easily. And occasionally you'll get someone that's fairly well balanced. I'm fairly balanced in those three, but with an excessive score in expressive. And that's the one that confuses most people. Expressive is that individual that is intuitive, is a risk taker, is messy, thinks outside the box, is the person that will and can dominate the setting in which you find yourself. And so that's my home base. That's where I have gotten myself into trouble a lot over my career professionally. I've only almost been fired 2 or 3 times.
But yet, you also, I've heard you on many occasions, provide advice to emerging leaders, even to people that are already quite established in their leadership roles, in terms of being fired. And what's that?
Yeah.
Should always be willing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, you always, you know, I have a very, very strong philosophy about work. First, it's a primary motivator for me on a day-to-day basis. I feel sort of hollow inside if I'm not being what I perceive to be as productive. And for an expressive, being engaged, as is it for a driver, being engaged in getting something done is very, very important. So I'm tilted to that side of the quadrant. And the other thing about, before we get to amiability, is to talk about one other additional thing, and that is those of us that are drivers and expressives primarily, we like to tell people what to do. So leaders, when we're coaching people, and especially if you're really, really a dominant driver or a dominant expressive, And you want to be able to coach those leaders in order to become reflective and more effective, is to sort of figure out a way to back off of that in some of your verbiage. But we like to tell people what to do. You and I have never had a problem doing that. So on the flip side of that is the amiable and analytical. And the amiable is self-explanatory. They're the glue that holds the organization together in the sense of people support and supporting relationships. They will go in and create harmony. They'll create and minimize stress.
Well, I'm a little confused.
Okay.
Because I know, and this applies to some of the other topics that we're going to be talking about in future programs, but it sounds like you're just really balanced. I mean, you've got strengths above the line, social styles above the line, below the line, and I'm all above the line. I mean, does that make me less of an effective leader?
Oh, absolutely not. And in fact, one of the things, as you well know, that when we go in and do organizational audits and health appraisals to help them reshape or transition to a new set of structures or develop new systems, is that we are very cogent in understanding and making our associates that we're working with understanding that you want, there's no bad style. First of all, no bad style. There's nothing wrong with an analytical, there's nothing wrong with an amiable because they like to ask questions. There's nothing wrong with a driver or an expressive because they have a tendency most often to tell people and enjoy telling people what to do. When you're looking at really effective leadership, Tony, what we want to have here is a balanced organization. Now, using this scenario, these 4 social styles, what do you think would happen? What do you think would happen if you have a management team, let's say 10 people, a management team of 10 persons, and 9 of them were analytical?
I mean, I would say immediately that they spent a lot of time thinking. They spent a lot of time reviewing figures. They spent a lot of time in the numbers, in the minutia of things, and really going very far in depth. But I wonder how much gets done.
That's exactly right. So one of the things that effective leaders, and when we're working with them, is trying to create balance, even though it may be outside of their style. All of us have elements of all 4. There's no one with a 0. We've never come up against anyone with a 0 amiability or
Sure.
A 0 analytical. But what you want to do is that you want to strive in some way to try to figure out how, as a leader, as a member of this management team or this leadership team, is that how can we effectively produce and balance all 4 styles so that we have it represented at the table.
And this goes back to something that we've been talking about on several of our shows, and that is the fact that so often in organizations, and it does not matter what type of organization, it doesn't matter what sector that we're talking about, there's such a strong emphasis upon technical acumen, upon functionality, that these types of things that we're talking about are either ignored, they're deemed insignificant or far less important than trying to achieve that bottom line, trying to achieve that sales goal, trying to meet the targets. And what we're saying is that people are very complex, and we cannot afford to not take the time to be a reflective leader, to explore our social styles, our strengths, our emotional intelligence, that we've been talking about and we'll be talking about more. And I mean, the consequences of failing to do so are incalculable. I mean, it's really something. And with the organizations, in which we work now, both individually, I think that we see on a daily basis that these things matter most of the time even more than that technical skill, that technical knowledge.